Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and tonight I'm going to do an update on the Schiit Loki. I first did a review of the Loki about 6 months ago, and the reason I'm doing an update is because apparently a lot of people are still interested in the Loki. I've had about over 2,700 views on that review, and which is the highest number I've had on any of my reviews so far. And I'm still averaging about 25 to 30 views per day on that. So I decided to do an update for a couple of reasons. Mostly because I've updated my other equipment, upgraded my other equipment since then. And also, I've had 6 months of experience with it, so I think I can give you a better idea of what the Loki is capable of now. At the time I did my last review, my equipment that I was using was, as far as headphones, my best headphone at that time was the Hi-Fi Man HE560. And I was running the Loki into a Emotiva A100 Bass X amp. And even though it's a very good amp, I was running it with the jumpers in, which makes it extremely powerful, but it does have a pretty high noise floor. With the Hi-Fi Man HE560s and the Sundaras and the HE500 that I was using at the time, I couldn't hear that noise floor, so it wasn't an issue, but I didn't have any sensitive headphones then, which would reveal the noise floor in the amp. So with the noise floor in the amp higher than the noise floor of the Loki, it was hard to tell where I was actually at with Loki. So since then, I've acquired a Audio GD Master 9, which you can see above my head, which is an extremely quiet amp. I mean, no background noise at all. It can run anything from the most difficult headphones all the way to IEMs with absolutely no background noise. I think it's actually rated at a signal to noise ratio of about 130 decibels. So anyway, extremely quiet, and I'm using the benchmark DAC1, which has a signal to noise ratio of 116 decibels. So the Loki, which is rated by Schiit at a signal to noise ratio of 109 decibels, should be the first to show up of the three components. So now also I have more sensitive and better headphones, so I can, number one, the noise floor should be easier to detect, and also I can hear a lot more detail. I'm using the Kennerton Valley headphone, and just a couple weeks ago I got a hold of a Kennerton Thrower, which is their flagship headphone, and it's extremely revealing, very, very clear and detailed. So if there's any problems with any of the components in the line, it's going to show up on the Kennerton Thrower. So anyway, in my first video, I discussed quite extensively whether or not an audiophile should even be using an EQ in their system. And I'm not going to get into that again. I'm not going to repeat the last video. So if you want to hear my thoughts on EQs, go back and watch my first video that was done 6 months ago, the review of the Schiit Loki. Also, I took the time and showed you close-up views of the Loki and the controls and the connections on the back and all that. I'm not going to repeat that either. So once again, if you want to see any of that, refer back to my last video. So anyway, now I'm using the Loki. I've got it in between the benchmark DAC1 and the Audio GD Master 9. And obviously I had to use the single-ended input or output from my DAC1 into the Loki, and then single-ended input into the Audio GD Master 9 because the Loki doesn't have balanced in or out. So anyway, I'll get into that a little later. But the first thing that I wanted to talk about is now with the Master 9 being an extremely quiet, zero hiss in the background, black background amp, now I could search for the noise floor of the Loki. And I used my Kennerton Valley headphone, which is pretty efficient. It's a very easy to drive headphone, much easier than any of the Hi-Fi Man headphones. It's a dynamic driver type of headphone, and I believe it is 32 ohms and 100 decibels at 1 milliwatt, so very easy to drive. So anyway, what I did is I took I used my Valley headphones and I put a CD in my CD player, which is a transport that goes into the DAC1. And what I did is I paused the CD, and first of all, I was normal listening level with the Valley on the Audio GD. I was at I'm running around 24 on the volume knob out of 0 to 100. I was at about 24 on the volume knob, and depending on what CD I'm listening to, that can go up or down a couple numbers. But anyway, usually in the 20s, almost always in the 20s. So what I did is I paused the CD player and then turned the volume knob to see how high I had to go to pick up any background noise from the Loki. And I went from the normal listening level of in the mid-20s, and I had to reach 86 on the volume knob before I heard any background hiss at all. I mean, still just slight. That's where I had to be at 86 before I heard anything at all. And so I tried using the bypass switch, and the noise was still there. But if I turned the unit off, the little bit of hiss I was hearing did disappear. So obviously that is where the hiss was coming from, is the Loki. But like I said, I was at a volume of 86 on the dial of my Master 9, and my normal listening level was about a 24. So I mean, there is no way I could ever listen to it at 86. I mean, first of all, I'd destroy the headphones, I'd destroy my ears, and then even if there was any music playing, I wouldn't hear the hiss. So basically what it comes down to is a level of hiss at 109 decibels down is going to be below the noise floor of a CD, and it's going to be way below the noise floor of any recording probably ever made. So the noise floor is completely not an issue. You will never ever hear it during normal listening levels. As far as distortion, I've tried the Loki all the way up to boost of 12 decibels on the bass and treble, which it's capable of. I never personally use it that high. I never use it above about 5 decibels of boost. That would be on the bass and treble sometimes. And but according to Schiit, the Loki, no matter how far you turn the knobs, even at 12 decibels of boost, it should still be at somewhere in the neighborhood of like 0.1, or was it 0.01? I forget. Anyway, the distortion levels are completely inaudible. So the only way you're going to end up with any distortion is if you boost the bass, say, 12 decibels, which is capable of. The problem you may run into is overdriving your amp. The Schiit Loki itself is not going to cause any distortion, but I discussed this in the first video, how when you increase your bass by 3 decibels, if you boost it, you're doubling your need for power. And by the time you go to 12 decibels of boost, you're multiplying the power you're requiring from your amp by 16 times. So if you were at, like, say, a watt, you're listening, which would be a pretty inefficient headphone or very loud. But anyway, say you're drawing a watt and you boost the bass by 12 decibels. You're multiplying that by 16 times, and you're now at 8 watts that you're trying to draw from your amp. And there are very few amps that are capable of putting out that kind of power. So what you're doing is you're now clipping your amp, and that is where the distortion's coming from. So bottom line, the Loki is not going to add any audible background hiss or any distortion if your amp is capable of handling the power required by a heavy boost on the bass. But like I said, I normally never run the thing past 3 o'clock on the knobs, which would be about 5 decibels of boost on either the bass or treble. I've got 6 different headphones right now that I've used, so I was going to just kind of go through them and tell you where I'm at with these as far as what I'm doing with the Loki. I have the Grotto SR80E, and I really like it. It's a nice entry-level audiophile headphone, but it sounds a little thin and a little bright to me. And so what I like to do, I found out if I put the bass, the lowest knob, the 20 hertz knob, up to about 3 o'clock, which is about 5 decibels of boost. Leave the 2 mid-range knobs at 12 o'clock, which would be 0 boost or cut. And then the treble, which I think is a little bit bright for me on the Grotto, I turn it back to about 10, and it takes that edge off the treble. And it really makes the Grotto SR80 really sound good to me. It sounds like a much more expensive headphone. Another example would be the 3 Hi-Fi Man headphones I have, the HE 500, 560, and the Sundara. And really, I like the tone balance on the Hi-Fi Man. All 3 of them, they're pretty close to the same. Some people think they're a little bit bright, but I actually like the treble where it's at. But I do, on some music, I like to give them about 2 decibels of boost, which would be about, go to about 2 o'clock on the bass dial, and that would put it at about 3 decibels of boost on the bass. And it just makes them sound a lot more solid, gives them more impact on the bass. And it's not always necessary, it depends on the music. The Kennerton Valley, I personally think the bass is perfect on that headphone. Just the right amount of impact, and no complaints at all. So the only thing about the Valley is the treble rolls off a little bit more than I like. I don't think it's a problem with the Valley itself. The Valley treble is probably great for most people, but being 54 years old, I probably lost a little bit of sensitivity to the treble. So about a 2 or 3 decibel boost on the treble makes the Valley sound perfect to me. The Kennerton Thror, which is their flagship headphone, and I've only had it for a couple weeks, and in my opinion, the tone balance is pretty much perfect. But it depends what you're listening to. As far as the music, I think it was really designed for, which would be acoustical, jazz, orchestral music, classical music. As far as those types of music, I think the tone balance on the Thror is perfect. I love the treble on the Thror. Anyway, but on some types of music, I would say like electronic, dance, probably rock music, it can sound a little lacking in bass impact to me. So just a very small boost, 2, maybe 3 decibels depending on the music. Like I said, some music If a recording's right, the thrower is perfect and I don't touch it. But if the music's a little bit lacking in bass, giving it just, put it in about 2 o'clock on the dial on the 20 hertz knob, and just makes the thrower perfect to me. So for that type of music. So anyway, what I'm getting at is that what this Loki can do is I've noticed in my headphone group that a lot of people have 2, 3 headphones and listen to different headphones depending on what kind of music they're listening to. And basically by spending $149 on the thrower, you can kind of eliminate that problem where you need different headphones for different music. You can, depending on what music you're listening to, just a small tweak in the bass or treble or whatever, you can make your headphones sound great with pretty much any music out there. So instead of having 2 or 3 expensive headphones, you could probably get by with one good headphone and the Schiit Loki and be happy with almost any music. I've had this thing for 6, 7, 8 months now. And to this day, the only problem I found with it is a slight flaw in the build quality. I think I pointed this out in the first video that a couple of the tone adjustment knobs were slightly off center and they are glued on, so there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, they're just off a hair, a tiny bit. Some other people had pointed that out, and I had to really look at it to even notice it on mine. I think it was the third knob is just off a tiny bit. Other than that, not a problem at all, and very happy with it, and no issues whatsoever. Before I wrap this up, and I'm hoping this message gets out to Schiit, because what I would really like to see, and maybe they've already got this in their plans, maybe it's in their future, but the Schiit Loki is referred to as the mini Loki. What I would really like to see would be a mid-size Loki, up at the size of the Schiit Lear or the Jotunheim, that size chassis, and then instead of 4 tone adjustments, maybe 6. What I'd like to see is the bass adjustments at 20 hertz, which I think is perfect. The treble adjustment is at 8,000 hertz. What I'd like to see is if it had 6 adjustments instead of 4, what they could do is bump the top one up to 10,000 hertz and then the second one down to like 6,000 hertz, and space them out a little bit more. And I think that would be great in my opinion. And then what I'd really like to see is balanced inputs and outputs, because right now I'm needing to use the single-ended outputs of my benchmark DAC into the single-ended inputs of my Master 1, or Master 9, I'm sorry. And I'd really like to be able to use balanced all the way through. So a mid-sized Loki with 6 bands of tone adjustment and balanced in and balanced out would be great in my opinion. I realize it'd have to be a little more expensive, but I think people would be okay with that. So if you're listening, Schiit Audio, that's my suggestion, a mid-size Loki. So anyway, with the better equipment, I still find no flaws with the Schiit Loki. No background noise, no distortion, does exactly what it's designed to do and does it very well. So no complaints at all, and can still highly recommend it. Anyway, gonna wrap this up now. So once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If you like this video, if it helped you in any way, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And also, I'm the administrator over at the Headphone Experience on Facebook, and I give you my personal invitation to join us over there. So I also thought I'd mention that I've got A pair of headphones coming in this week, kind of a mid-level headphone, and got a couple amps coming in. One is pretty high-end. I think it's even higher up the scale than my Master 9. Might be a step up, so pretty excited about that, and hope to get a couple of first impression videos out in the next couple of weeks. So hope you'll watch those too. Anyway, that's about it. So hope to see you soon, and hope you watch my next video. Thank you.